John Incledon from the Hisamitsu America from SalonPas. At 30 minutes past the hour, Dan Soberberg, he's our dad in chief. He co-authored a book, Elevator Jones, with his 9-year-old son. In hour number 2, we're going to have the legendary C.S. Keys from the West Coast. He's going to join us, and we're going to talk about the aftermath of the Super Bowl. We're going to talk about the relocation strategies for San Diego and Oakland. You know, though they might not be going anywhere this year, what about in year 2? We're also going to talk about, you know, we have to talk about Cam Newton. We have to talk about race and therefore race relations. In hour number 2, 30 minutes past the hour, we're going to talk with Rosalind Ross. You all know her. With Rosalind, we're going to talk, various topics. Between NBA All-Star Game, we're going to talk a little binge watching. We're going to talk about fitness, and we're going to talk about Valentine's Day best practices. So that is tonight's roll call. It is now 5 minutes past. Before we have our first guest on, I want to say thank you once again to Verizon Fios for supporting the show. Fios New York, we're really excited about the partnership. We want to thank you guys and all the folks that made an effort to make this partnership work. So we definitely want to say thank you. And I guess without further ado, we're going to bring on our first guest of the evening because it's 8:06, 6 minutes past the hour, and I'm 1 minute late. Hello, John. How you doing?
Very good. Good evening, Ted.
How are things? Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. Things are good.
That's good. That's good. I mean, I got to tell you, I got a story for you. It was right after the holidays. So my wife had asked me, so we have an artificial Christmas tree. And it usually goes up in the attic every, just after, usually around the first, but for some reason my wife said, okay, can we get the tree up? And it was December 26th. John, I got to tell you, as I was putting the tree up, I took a spill on the ladder. And the tree was up safely, but I wound up on my back. There's no permanent damage or anything else like that, but I did feel some back pain. And I needed something to subside the pain. And I asked my wife, I said, and this is a shameless plug, but this is actually true. She used the SalonPas pain-relieving jet spray, which was very helpful. So when the opportunity came up this week when I was speaking with the PR team, I was so excited to be able to have the opportunity to get you on. But, John, you're very busy. You're CEO. You're president of Hisamitsu.
Hisamitsu. It's a Japanese company, so Hisamitsu.
Hisamitsu America. So I want to say thanks for taking a few minutes. I got a couple of questions for you because I know you're tight for time. Tell me about the origins of Hisamitsu Pharmaceuticals.
Okay. Well, Ted, first of all, thank you for sharing your story. You know, wintertime, the way you hurt your back, a little bit unusual, but we get a lot of similar things where people are getting hurt and muscle pain from shoveling driveways and the like. Fortunately, for a lot of folks, it hasn't been a crazy winter weather-wise, but if anybody runs into a problem, we're certainly there as we were for you. Hisamitsu America, actually, Hisamitsu Pharmaceutical Company is our parent company based in Japan, founded in 1847. They're a publicly traded company, do about $1.5 billion in sales. Our primary brand, marketed in some 70 countries around the world, is a brand called SalonPas. And that brand was launched in Japan in 1934, brought to the United States in 1989. Our company really has one mission. We're very singularly focused, and that's to improve the quality of life for pain sufferers through patch. We call this salonopathy. I don't know, Ted, if your listeners ever wondered how medicine was administered back in the early 1800s, but the CEO of our company, I'm talking our parent company in Japan now, built a public medical museum in Tosu, Japan. And the museum actually walks you through the history of the development of medicine and the administration of medicine. And way back in the early 1800s, at least in Japan, medicine was carried in backpacks by the precursor to pharmacists, who literally went from town to town and administered the medicine right there on the spot, compounding it, developing poultices, which are actually a precursor to what we call patches today.
Excellent, John. I got to tell you, it's an easy question for me, but the question I have from some of our listeners, why should consumers choose SalonPas?
I think that comes down to three things that I kind of think would be important to consumers. First is the quality of what they're buying. The second is the value of what they're buying, and the third is really what's the mission of the company and how reliable are they in delivering that mission. The quality of our products, scientifically speaking now, are world-renowned. I myself have fielded phone calls from European pharmaceutical companies that are interested in getting in touch with our R&D team in Japan, because we're basically known as the world's leaders in hydrogel patch technology. And it's not just that technology. It's over the course of 170 years of marketing and manufacturing patches, you learn that even little things can mean a lot to consumers. A couple of quick examples are, that latex is something people are allergic to, so you want to avoid where you can having latex in the patches. Things like having rounded corners on patches. Believe it or not, there's a difference in the rate of peeling when you have a patch that has square corners versus a patch that has rounded corners. So from a lot of experience and I think we've really developed and have a reputation for being really the quality manufacturer of patch technology. From a vantage point, and by the way, one other point that maybe your listeners might be interested in is the Japanese have developed a business concept, and I know it's taught in a number of business schools in the United States. It's this concept of Kaizen, which basically means continuous improvement. And I know our company is routinely updating our products. Right now, we're in the process of replacing best-selling patch item in the United States with a new and improved version. That's because of our focus on salonopathy, which, again, is to give the consumer the best possible pain management experience we can. From a value standpoint, because that was really the second reason I think folks may want to choose our brand, we do have a range of products, but at the end I would call a very good product. You really get a great value there. You can basically, the patch at retail is going to be about 18 cents, and I think when you compare that with, let's say, a couple of Advil in a 24-count bottle, that cost compares very, very favorably. At the other end, we do have some very premium technologies that have different formulations, different size patches, and different patch materials, and they can retail upwards of $1 to $1.20 a patch. And I guess finally, I would reiterate the fact that our mission is really singular focused. It's that idea of salonopathy, which is to improve the quality of life for people in pain through patch.
John, thank you so much for that thorough answer. I guess my next question is, and I'll start off with a statement. Pain relief patches are not new, because I've heard of Tiger Balm and Icy Hot and Bengay. You have all these different brands and competitors out there. But how is SalonPas the only FDA patch that's currently out there?
Yeah, Ted, I actually get this question a lot, and most Americans, I think, are unaware that the United States is one of the only countries that does not pre-approve every drug. In the early 1970s, the Food and Drug Administration published drug monographs, OTC, drug monographs, and this was an attempt to not have to review everything and to distill it to, let's consider a monograph a cookbook. So the monographs contain the recipe for different OTC drugs, and it prescribes the exact labeling you need on the box, the dose of the product, the active pharmaceutical ingredient, and the levels that are going to be in that product. You and I, Ted, could go to business tomorrow making our own version of Tylenol if we found a current good manufacturing, practicing manufacturing facility, a CGMP facility. As long as our product conformed to that monograph and we labeled it as such, we could go to business tomorrow and we don't have to have the FDA approve our product because we stayed within the monograph. The reason SalonPas is the first FDA-approved topical NSAID OTC, that's because there's another pathway. Most people don't use that pathway because it's a lot of time and expense, and that's the FDA's new drug application process. We worked for 7 years to get FDA approval, and finally in 2008 we did. So we are, in fact, the first topical NSAID approved OTC. Why would we do that? And just to give you a feel for cost, the filing fee for an NDA is currently $1.2 million. And when you pay that fee, that's a user fee. That's so that the employees of the FDA, their cost for reviewing your data is covered. And that gets reviewed by Congress every few years, and the cost keeps going up. So we paid a user fee of $1.2 million on top of all the clinical work we did. And when you pay a user fee, you get a 10-month review. That doesn't guarantee you're going to be approved. You just get feedback. And ultimately, as I say, in 2008, we came on the market. But when you do an NDA, you're operating outside that cookbook, outside that monograph. And what that gave us was two unique claims within the entire category. One is the fact that we were able to clinically support that our product works up to 12 hours. So there is a duration claim benefit there for consumers. The second, and maybe more important, every OTC pain drug in the U.S., and I'm talking including systemic drugs, Advil, Aleve, Tylenol, they are all indicated to treat only minor or mild pain. We're the only product, because we did clinical studies in tough or moderate pain, that when you look at the drug facts on the back of our box, we're the only product indicated to treat both mild as well as tougher moderate pain. So we did all the clinical work. We paid the filing fee. It took us 7 years, but this is why we're different than what you find in the rest of the marketplace.
John, as thorough as can be. I mean, I have a huge smile on my face right now because, I mean, oh my goodness, excellent. So I want to let the folks know that we're speaking with John Incledon, the president and CEO of. Hang on 1 second. And excuse me 1 second, I lost my train of thought. The makers of the SalonPas relief product. John, there's a great blog that's on your website, and it talks about consumers overuse over-the-counter pain pills and, you know, the alternate topical treatment that's overlooked. And you really went into that in your last answer. But the question I have for you is, so, you know, nowadays people are concerned. Everyone's an educated consumer about what they're putting into their bodies. And one question I have to ask you, does SalonPas contain any type of steroids?
I can tell you, Ted, I'm pleased to tell you that in fact we do not contain any steroids whatsoever.
Perfect. Like I said, I know you are short for time, but one question I had to ask you, well, two final questions. One that's off the topic is, so we had Super Bowl 50 this past Sunday. You had kind of new school and old school with Peyton Manning and Cam Newton. I wanted to know, which team were you rooting for, or are you not a fan of either team?
Well, you know, I heard your opening where you were talking about the fact you're going to talk about the relocation, I guess, of San Diego and Oakland, or the potential for that. You know, I've been a long-suffering St. Louis Ram fan. I mean, I followed them when they were in Los Angeles. So I wasn't particularly fond of either, or I didn't really have a favorite in that Super Bowl. However, What I would say is that, just like you hear some of the voters in the primary saying that they're kind of tiring of names like Bush and Clinton, I was kind of tiring of the Manning name. He's been around, he's been in the media, and so I was looking maybe for a fresh team to come in and win maybe their first Super Bowl and generate some excitement that way. So if I was leaning anyway, it was towards the Panthers, and I guess as an added reason, I've got a son that's Wake Forest University in Winston-Salem, which is, of course, is in North Carolina.
Of course. Well, like I said, the one good thing about the Panthers, yes, they lost the game, and I'm going to go into it later in segment 3. They're going to be around for a very long time because they appear to have a pretty young nucleus, so I expect them to be up there challenging in the next 3 to 4 years. Another question, easy question for you, as we get ready to close you out. Where can we find SalonPas?
Well, we've got pretty good distribution in your food and drug retailers across the country. We're in mass retailers like Walmart. You can even find us in Costco and also Dollar General and Family Dollar. So we're in a lot of outlets, and I guess I would close out, first by saying thank you so much, Ted, for taking the time to speak with me. But also for anybody that's out there in pain, consider some of the things we talked about. Some of the risks, if you're using a lot of pain pills, it's not a zero-sum game. I don't have to take only pills or only patches. Good medicine and good pain management may involve using both products in a therapeutic form, both for your safety but also for your relief.
John, we want to give you a round of applause. You shot the ball. You scored. The crowd went wild. You hit a grand slam, John. I want to thank you for taking the time out this evening to speak with our listeners here on Late Night Parents. The podcast will be your specific section of the podcast will be up by early tomorrow, and I'll send that off to your team. But I really do appreciate you taking a few minutes out of your evening to reach out to us on the East Coast. So thanks again.
Thank you so much, Ted, and good night, everybody. I appreciate it.
And that was John Incledon from Hisamitsu America, Hisamitsu Pharmaceutical Company. And they are the parent, the parent company of SalonPas. So that was pretty cool to have a CEO and president, Japanese company. John oversees the American unit, the unit in the Americas. So really, really excited to have John here. Really quick, want to go in, and there was an article I wanted to bring up because it was about, one second. It was about dating the grown-up way. 4 reasons going courting is even more romantic when you're over 40. And the 4 ways. So there's 4 reasons why dating is more rewarding among the older set. Reason 1 is a man who is experienced with women should be less anxious or competitive. He's likely to be more at ease and could focus on his romantic partner as a person. Item number 2 is mature people have spent time traveling, seeking out adventures, and becoming educated. They have memories and feelings to share about their experiences and can converse about a much wider range of topics than the plot twist in the latest, Star Wars movie. Although they possibly can discuss that too. Reason number 3. A woman who's been married or involved is likely to know how to entertain because she's had the opportunity to play hostess probably many times over. If you're lucky, she may even cook. Reason number 4. Mature people know how to speak in an affectionate sentences longer than LOL. Don't you just hate the LOL on, with texting nowadays? They are also more accustomed to working for what they want, which includes showing you a good time. They say youth is wasted on the young, and sometimes maybe romances too. Certainly, young love is wonderful, but romance for older folks can be even better. I just read you an excerpt from Dating Up the Grown Up Way. It's by Barbara Foster, who's a women's studies professor and the author of Confessions of a Librarian, a memoir of loves. So wanted to briefly talk about that. Also, to let you guys know, like I said, we've got various guests scheduled here tonight. There's been so much going on. There's been primaries going on. There's people dropping out of the primaries. This is not a political show. This is not a sports show. This is not a tech show. Sometimes we're not even a parenting show. This is not a product review show, even though we were just discussing a specific product. And I was putting forth those shameless plugs. We're a little bit all the above. Real quick, I will go to a real brief break, and I'll be back in 45 seconds.
Check this out. This is Ted Hicks from Late Night Parents, and we wanted to let you know about Black History Month. February is Black History Month, but we like to say every single month is Black History Month. We should recognize the rich culture and heritage of Black people, and although the battles have not been won yet, we should be proud to take some time out this month to explore the powerful and victorious lineage of our people. That's right, so don't be a vulture and learn about your culture. Late Night Parents salutes the history of Black people and the history that we have yet to make. That's right, and it's not a mistake. Now back to the live show.
And we're back. Wanted to give a plug. It's Black History Month. There's so much going on. I would say within the last 18 months, even longer than that, we sit and we talk about, there's specific hot topics going on out there, and race is always one. Race is a topic we talk about on our Saturday show, Baseball, Beer, and Barbecue. But we talk about it in when it's appropriate. Just putting it out there. Like later on tonight, we're going to be talking about Cam Newton. We're going to talk about some of the hate when certain terms are mentioned, like, oh, he's a thug, he's this, he's that. It's good to air things out every once in a while. Everyone might not be happy. Some of our people that listen to the show, some of the sponsors that listen to the show might not be happy, but sometimes you do have to talk about it, because that's the only thing. When we have these open discussions, is going to be the only thing, and not just an open discussion on this show, but all over. So some of these stereotypes, and it's not just with African Americans, it's with every race. It's with LGBT. I like to say I'm proud of this show because we've spoken with everyone. The last, I would say, year and a half that we've been on the air, we've opened all doors, we've talked with people. Next couple of upcoming weeks, we're going to talk with a topic that I had to run by management. The topic I ran by management was talking about prisons and education. And we were talking about, and I just wanted to be okay with that. I wanted to know how everyone felt about, hey, if someone's incarcerated, and how would they feel about that person that's incarcerated. who supposedly is supposed to be rehabilitated, is also actually trying to obtain a degree. So, we spare no topic here at all. But the one question I had, or the one topic that I had, was for, I can't even talk about this right now because I think we have someone else in the queue. It's 8:30, but hopefully we'll get back to this later tonight, because the topic is when convicts go to college. Higher education in prison is a good deal for everyone. And this topic is a hot topic because, and I'll spend just one quick minute on it, because America as a whole spends $80 billion a year keeping criminals behind bars. But research has shown that the cost can be reduced by making one thing more accessible to inmates: education. So hopefully tonight we'll be able to get back to this topic. If not, it's understood. I believe we have our dad-in-chief on the line, Dad from Dad's Time Out, from Elevator Jones, Dan Soberberg, on the line right now. Dan, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you guys doing?
Pretty good. Thanks for joining us tonight. I know you and I, we met through Twitter, and
yep.
There was a request for you to come on to the show, and number one, I always support, with me being dad myself, I always want to make an effort to get out there and support the other dads and dad bloggers that are out there. So welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, and it's very much appreciated. Thanks for getting back to me on Twitter and helping me, do a little book promotion and talk a little bit about what my son and I worked on together.
Definitely. And I'm going to probably work with you behind the scenes, because I definitely want to get a copy of Elevator Jones, but we'll get to that later on.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. Yep.
But I wanted to talk with you because, it's very exciting. You co-authored a children's book, the first of a series, the Elevator Jones series, with your 9-year-old son. So got to ask you, how was that? How did you come about with that idea?
Well, it's funny. We, a couple of years ago, I had been talking to my wife about how I wanted to write a children's book. I've been blogging for years on, fatherhood topics and sports and cars and, typical guy kind of stuff. And I had, we were taking a long car ride somewhere. I talked about how I wanted to write a children's book, and she was like, well, you should do it. And it was one of those things where it was sort of like, yeah, maybe one of these days I'll get to it. And finally, a couple of years went by. My kids got a little bit older. My son, was learning to read and getting interested in books himself. So I was like, all right, I'm going to do it. And I took a class in New York, one of the Gothic writing workshops on children's writing. Came home, wrote a story that had been sort of bouncing around in my head for a few years, and the kids loved it. And my son, who was probably 7.5 at the time, asked if we could write a book together. And I was like, yeah, that would be terrific. So it gave us an opportunity to work together, and it gave me a chance to, instead of just saying, hey, I'm going to write this children's story and that's the end of it, it made it into sort of a fun little hobby that we could work on together. So that's sort of how it started. Just sort of an innocent question from a first grader. Or he might have been at the start of second grade by that time. And he came up with a character name. He thought Elevator Jones was a good name for a character, and I said, I think there's a lot of things we could do with somebody named Elevator Jones, and we sort of crafted the story around the name of the character. So we knew the name of the character before we had any idea what it was that he was going to be doing.
Hey, Dan, I'm here. I'm sitting here talking to you, and I had the mute button on because I just wanted to make sure you came through as clear as possible. So I'm sorry about
that's okay.
that.
I want to make sure I didn't lose you.
Oh, yeah, no, you didn't lose me. So I got to tell you this. Before we, and totally get into the thought process for the book and everything else like this. So your dad of, how many kids do you have?
2 kids. I have a 9-year-old boy and a 6-year-old girl.
Okay, cool. No, so now your 6-year-old girl, maybe she's too young, because I'm going to say there has to be, with you writing a book or co-authoring a book with your son, what do you plan to do with your daughter?
Well, it's funny because her and I actually tonight were working on her story. So after my son and I, wrote our book and we published it, she said she came to me on her own when she was only 5 at the time. Hadn't even started first grade, and she came to me and she said, "When are we going to write my book?"
Of course.
And I said, "As soon as you want to. When do you want to start?" So that was really cool. As much fun as my son and I had working on our book and starting on the sequel to it now, having a 5-year-old come to you and tell you that
that's great.
She wanted to work on her book was really cool.
What is Mom's take about this? About watching you and your son bond together like this.
Well, she loves it. She's been supportive. We've been married for 12 years now, and she's always been very supportive of me. I'm very busy. Like, I'm always doing something. So if I'm not, I work full time, but then I'm like writing blogs and writing articles and teaching classes and developing classes and online courses, and I'm always doing something. So I think she thinks it's funny that I'm like busy all the time, but she's always very supportive. She was very proud of the work that we did together, and I think extremely proud of the way my son responded to having the book published. Because he was out there sort of promoting it. He was telling people, hey, we finished our book. You want to read the book? We've done a couple of book signings. So it's been sort of a way to, empower him and give him something that's his own. And he's also we've put some money to the side, some of the proceeds from the book, to donate to charity, and he chose a children's home of York. We live in York, Pennsylvania, and it's a local foster home. And so we've been in contact with them. In a few weeks, we're going to put together some duffel bags full of toiletries and journals and pens and pencils and some books, and take it to the kids some of the foster kids that don't have things of their own when they get placed in a new home. So that's something that came out of this too. So it gives him a chance to be charitable. So everything it's all positive, and I think she's just proud. She's just proud of the work that we're doing, and she's extremely supportive of it.
That's excellent. That's excellent. As long as I tell you this much. There's no roadblocks you can run into when that foundation is set up at home, and you guys are supportive of each other, and she's supportive of your endeavors or initiatives that you're putting forward. And what's also key, what I've picked up from this conversation, is that you are also at the same time, your son, with him being 9, because my son is 8, and you're not starting, but you're teaching him some, core values of, hey, we're going to take, some of the proceeds and we're going to donate it here. And having his input on, hey, this is where we should, donate this to, because some of these kids aren't as privileged as I am. You're doing definitely an excellent job with that. I guess my next question is, and for some reason, wives do find it funny when you're working, you're blogging, you're doing podcasts, you're doing this, you're doing that, and it's I guess for our end, it's never enough, because
Right.
it really is never enough, because you're sitting there, and I look at a lot of this that we do is, I hate to put us in a box and call us dad bloggers, but we're really more about networking. We're really more about networking.
Yeah, that's a huge part of it.
So do you? I ask you this much: do you go to any dad blogger like conventions? Like, do you go to there's Dad Blogger 2.0 coming up? Dad 2.0 coming up.
Yeah, I actually haven't in the past. I've thought about, I'm not terribly active on Twitter and Facebook. I post my stuff up there, but I don't, I'm not as interactive probably as I should be. And I've looked at some of those things that haven't been spurred to action yet.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. So you mentioned you were blogging for years. How many years were you blogging for?
Let's see. Probably. Well, my daughter's 6. I'm 6.5 now. So I think the first blog post I wrote was the night before she was born. So about 6.5 years, and that was mostly done, sort of out of a nervous energy. And my wife was 2 weeks past due with her. She was holding out for a natural birth after having a C-section with our son, and our daughter was not cooperating. And the doctor was like, "Look, we can't push this any longer. She's got to come out." And that was our first indication of our daughter's strong will and stubbornness.
Yes.
And I think just sort of out of a nervous energy, I started writing. I just wrote a blog that had nothing to do with what I was going through. It was a sports blog. It was I grew up a Baltimore Orioles fan, so it was a sports blog about something the Orioles did. It was the middle of August, and I fired off a blog and posted it to a local sports website that let fans post content, and that was really the first one I had done, and it was probably really the first thing I'd written in. I did a lot of writing during college and wrote a couple of screenplays shortly after college. It was probably the first thing I'd actually written in 10 years.
Okay.
And it sort of got back into me. It made me remember how much I enjoyed writing, how I used that as a stress reliever, and that's sort of how I got started back into doing that stuff. And 6 years later, still doing it. There's a website based out of Baltimore called Splice Today that I've written a sports column for twice a week for the past 5.5 years.
Wow.
And they're terrific. And they're terrific. They generally let me write whatever I want. And every now and then the editor might push me in one direction or another, but usually not. And when I say every now and then, I mean maybe 3 times in 5.5 years. He's said, "Hey, why don't you write something about this?" So that's been it. That was sort of a great relationship that I just sort of stumbled on, and that's sort of how I got started. And I think that the children's writing sort of came out of that.
Okay.
The blogging is fun. It's fun, but there isn't a whole lot of meaning behind writing an opinion piece about, a trade that went down 2 days ago or something. It can be fun, and it's certainly a stress reliever for myself. So personally, it's beneficial, but there isn't a whole lot of intrinsic value, or long-term value out of writing that sort of content. So I think that's when I started thinking about writing for children because I knew that it could be more impactful, to get readers when they're young or before they're even readers.
That's true.
To try to get them interested in books and stories and creating their own stories and that sort of a thing.
I got to tell you, so this is, I like to say this is the primary show I sit on because I host it by myself, podcast that I host by myself. But on Saturdays, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, I do a podcast called Baseball, Beer, and Barbecue with two of the roughest, toughest, fill in the blank, co-hosts, and we talk, and it's great because sometimes, and I'm not, I mean, that's what I'm kind of picking up, Dan, from this conversation is we can talk about parenting, we can talk about, our children, we can talk about, some of these products that are pushed towards us, that people are asking us, hey, can you write about this? And then there's the side of me that I talk about the sport that I love, I write about the sport that I love. I spend a lot of time, primarily at Citi Field, as a Mets fan. I'm proud to say that. I guess all the other years I was an apologist up until last year when,
Yeah, you got plenty to be proud of this year.
Right. And, we tend to, we started to go around the country and, visit different ballparks and, kind of enjoy life. And we talk about it on our baseball podcast, along with talking about food and talking about beers. But it's just that mix of having those two different shows where I can sit and be goofy Saturday when I guess Wednesday night I'm sitting here and we're going to have this serious conversation and we're going to talk about Elevator Jones and how it's impacted your life. And, come on. It's good to let down your hair from time to time and do different things. So I think that's part of the reason why, you blog, you do this, you interact with, you network with different folks, because it's just, that's the type of people we are, and it was not a shot at any of the PR people, but I got to tell you, Dan, a lot of times, they push stuff your way saying, hey, can you do X, Y, Z? And you're just like, geez, let me check out the product first. Let me see if it's worthwhile. So I'm not sure if you're going down the route of, being that dad blogger, but I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting, and there's a lot of opportunity.
The blogs, for me, honestly, the Dad's Time Out blog I have is, it's really almost more of a repository of different things that I've written for different places. So, I certainly post original content there multiple times per week, but it's usually something that's appeared somewhere else. So that website usually just has a lot of links to other places. I've done a couple interviews for the book, so I'll post the link to the book, to that interview or article on the website. Everything, all the sports content and stuff that I write for Splice Today, ends up on Dad's Timeout as a link. And people can get to it through there. So that's really what the blog exists for now. There was a few years ago, 3 years ago actually, I tore my Achilles tendon, and I couldn't drive to work. I live in York and work in Baltimore, so I couldn't drive the 50-mile each way commute with a torn right Achilles. So I was on medical leave for about 11 weeks. And, it was either like, well, watch Netflix and go stir crazy, or figure out something productive to do with my time.
Right.
And that's actually when I started the blog. And when I did first start it, I did a lot more like review type things, and I used to post a lot of recipes and stuff like that. And I haven't done that stuff in a while, and I probably should, just to, diversify the content a little bit. But life catches up to you, and there's piano lessons and soccer practice and Cub Scouts and book signings and all those kind of things, and it takes away a little bit of time.
Basketball and cheerleading and you name it, volleyball, and you're in the car and you're driving back and forth and that long and windy road, But I think one question I had for you before we wrap up, the question was about your book. I know you've written several books, and I know this is a series that you're writing. Tell us about. Could you share with us the publishing process? Was it?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
So we started writing the book. My son was, when he said I want to write a book, I thought he meant like he wanted to write a story, and we started writing the book, or started writing the story, and he was like, no, I want this to be a book, like that we can sell to people. And I was like, oh, like that sort of, and in my head I'm thinking, well, that changed a lot of things. We're not just writing a story for ourselves. Now I have to figure out, like, how do I get the story published? Is it good enough? Is it a good enough story to get published? Like, what's this process? So I talked to one of my Splice Today editors who has published a couple of books, and she gave me some pointers and gave me places to find names of literary agents and things like that. And I've sent out probably about 35 query letters. And this was for the first book I wrote, which is called Buckley the Toothless Beaver, which is kind of self-explanatory. But the first story I wrote, I sent out about 35 letters, and probably got 10 responses. All of them were positive, like they liked the idea, they liked the story, they liked the character, but nobody was going to publish it. It was, one reason or another. They were a small publishing house. They don't do children's books anymore. Various different things. So I self-published that book through CreateSpace, which is Amazon's self-publishing platform. And the reason I got to CreateSpace was because I have a friend who's self-published a number of books through Amazon, and these are more like adult romance novel type things. And she gave me a lot of information about CreateSpace and was like, look, this is the simplest thing to do. It doesn't cost you anything out of pocket. There's no minimum books you need to buy. Try it out. So that's what I did. It was remarkably easy to use. I would say the Buckley the Toothless Beaver book, I was able to basically get the book formatted the way I needed to in less than an hour. I ordered a proof copy, and within a week I had a hard copy of the book in my hand. Said, okay, it's good. Log back into the website, hit approve. It immediately kicks you over to another page where it asks you if you want to make the book available on Kindle. You say yes, and that's pretty much it. The book is then available on Creates.com, on Amazon.com, and available as a Kindle download. So that's how we arrived at the self-publishing process. I knew that I had a book that I had written with an 8-year-old, and I didn't want to spend 3 or 4 years sending query letters out to agents and publishers trying to get the thing published, and publish a book for second graders when he's in 7th grade. That didn't make a lot of sense, wasn't very appealing to me. So, and that wasn't really the point of the project for us. The point of the project was that we were going to work together, we were going to create a story, and we were going to publish the book, and that's what we did. So for anybody that's looking to self-publish, I can't recommend CreateSpace enough, and the Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing program was terrific.
Totally. And I mean this in a productive way. Dan, Amazon is putting people out of business because they're doing it the right way. And, you're not chasing your tail. You're not running around doing this. like you said, sending out letters versus, hey, here's the way to do it. You're going to do it. We could push it through, and there's no issues. So
right, and it's really, and I understand, the Amazon thing can be, controversial to some people, but it depends on what your aim is. What are you trying to accomplish? I'm an IT professional and adjunct professor. That's how I make money. I don't make money from writing children's books. So we wrote a book together because it was a fun project, and we'd like as many people to read it as possible. But for us, the process was the fun part, not. That's right. We don't do it for money. My son just chimed in and said we don't do it for money. So that really wasn't the point for us. The point was that we were writing a story and we were creating something that we could share with people. If your aim is to sell 20,000 copies of your children's story, there are obviously other ways you should probably go. But that, obviously it's not what we were trying to accomplish. We wanted to make a book and share it with people and make it available as quickly and as cheaply as possible. So that's what we did.
Right. Dan, we're getting ready to close you out. I want to ask you, and this is your opportunity to plug your product, plug your book, plug, your various websites that you write for. Best ways to get in. I know you might not be on Twitter and Facebook a lot, but best ways to get in contact with you. And as I mentioned before, tell us about how to purchase the book and all the above.
Yep. So the book is available on Amazon. That's the easiest way to get it. It's available for in hard copy or in Kindle. And the book is called Elevator Jones. It's the story of a second grader named Henry Jones. He lives in the Grand Excelsior Hotel with his parents who work at the hotel. And the hotel has a magical elevator, and it allows Henry and his friend Horatio, the elevator operator, to travel through time, solve problems. And the first book deals with a bullying issue that Henry sort of inadvertently solves through the use of the elevator. And we're working on a follow-up book that hopefully will be available in the next 4 or 5 months. You can follow me on Twitter at Dad's Time Out, and Dad's Time Out is also the name of our website. So if you're looking for the blog, it's dadstimeout.tumblr.com. I also have a Facebook page, so if you're on Facebook, my Facebook page is Dan Soberberg Author, where you can see some updates for some local book signings and things that we have coming up. So.
Dan, thank you so much. I want to give you a round of applause.
Thanks.
And we're definitely going to stay in touch, Dan, because you hit upon one thing that there's several things we have in common besides dad blogging and everything else, talking about our kids and all. But we're both IT professionals. So I definitely
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, I would definitely want to sit and chat with you because about 18
that sounds
years.
Good.
Yeah, definitely. But it was a pleasure to have you on. This is the first time. This won't be the last, because when the next in the series of Elevator Jones comes out, definitely want to have you come through and promote the book and just as you do your books, I want you to be able as your forum. So I want to say thank you once again.
Well, thank you very much. It was a lot of fun. I can't wait to do it again. Thanks for the opportunity.
No problem. Take care. And that was Dan Soberberg. I like to say our dad-in-chief, but he's Dad's Time Out. He's co-authored a children's book, Elevator Jones, the first one in the series with his 9-year-old son. And that is the end of Hour 1. Hour 2 is getting ready to start right now.